Hello, everyone. We are back for another fireside chat. This is our fireside chat 29. And today we picked the topic that we've been discussing. Well, discussed quite a few times recently, and it's been a theme of discussion almost throughout my career. And this is about code reviews. So I believe that most of us as developers, we went through code reviews. Some of us do that very often, some of them not so often. And there are a lot of people have different views about it. And what we wanted to discuss is, are they a waste of time? Do they have a place in an agile team or in different environments? Are they useful? Are they not useful? So guys, let's start with what do we need code reviews for? I think that's probably a better place for us to start. What is it for? Well, what do you guys think?
I can start. The way I see it is that there are two elements to a code review. We can discuss whether they are useful or not, but the two reasons that they are used is one, to disseminate knowledge within the team. So if a pair or a single person is working, a code review is a good point to have more people look at it, and that way you disseminate knowledge of the certain decisions that were made. And I'm talking about the code review that is after the fact, by definition, right? You're reviewing the code itself. The other part of a code review, which is the more kind of generally kind of considered one, is when you're getting an extra pair of eyes so that they are looking at things that you may have missed, right? It could be related to just an extra pair of eyes, or it could be related to a more senior developer, a more experienced developer, or a tech lead who act like almost like a gatekeeper. They might be just looking to provide you with extra advice, an extra pair of eyes, or they might be doing the code review to actually approve your code before it can be taken into test and production environments.
Yeah, Jose, do you have a different, is there any other reasons that you would have code reviews for?
Mm, Not really, to be honest. Although I mean that
I've
I
covered it
find it
all.
you. What?
I've covered it all, am I?
Yeah, exactly.
So
So
can we
once,
stop now? Okay,
once,
that's it
That's
for the
it. This is
episode.
the end of
Okay.
the of
so
the fight.
once I have shut you up, my work is
Exactly.
done here.
No, no. I think it's yes. That underneath those seems to be good reasons to do it. But I find that there are a lot more cons to doing it than just and those two reasons you can solve. You don't need a process, right? Like to be able to do that. You want to show your code to someone, you show your code to someone. That's it, right? Like if you want to share knowledge around the domain, whatever, there's other techniques that you can use in order to do that, and I would argue that they're they're more effective than code reviews in the more traditional sense.
Okay, so
But
let's. So sorry. We have okay. Just to summarize, we have Mesh put two reasons. One is for sharing knowledge,
mhm.
right? So that's why we're doing code review, just to share knowledge across among people. And the other one is really like to be this an extra pair of eyes, but also be kind of a gatekeeper as well. Just make
Yeah,
sure that
so
you try to
he
keep up.
shared that second is like two kind of like no one is catching out, but the most often used one is the gatekeeping one,
Right. Right.
whether it's
Okay.
a quality gate or it's someone needs to sign off on this or whatever. um
Let's pick like one of those branches and explore a bit. I'll take probably the less controversial one first, right? So at least in my view, on those two that you mentioned, Ash.
I wouldn't be
Let's
so sure.
let's take the teaching one. So Is code reviews the best place for us to be sharing knowledge, and if it's not, like, what would be an alternative then?
One thing I would like to kind of further qualify the question a bit, right? There is a code review that is a mandatory thing, and then there is a code review that is on demand or when you think you need it, right? So I think every time when we mention code review, we talk about this mandatory process that sits, yeah. And so until I qualify otherwise, uh, let's talk about this mandatory process that it must always be there. So, and one of the reasons given is that it's there to share knowledge or for a more experienced person to look at your code and tell you something more, right? Now, I have a slightly maybe a controversial opinion on this. I think that I personally don't think that they inherently are a wrong thing to do, right? Often, when it comes to the act of learning, sometimes it's actually good for more junior developers or people who are just learning to know that there is a safety net. And I'm going to do and I'm going to think how I do things. And I might even make mistakes. But I know that, after I've done this, I've got someone who will look at this with me and and I have confidence that this other person who will look at it with me is experienced, right? And they will share their knowledge with me on how, and arguably you can talk about like sharing knowledge before the code is written. Well, not really. The whole act of learning is we talk about the craft and learning skills and so on. You create something, you make a hash of it, you learn through doing things wrongly, and it's almost it could be a mentoring process if it's done right, right? So I personally think that if it's done right in this kind of way, for that particular purpose, then I see nothing wrong in it.
I can,
Mhm.
sorry.
No, go on, Jose.
No, I can get behind that. The problem is that most of the time that's not what I've seen. No, it's not done right. No, like you get crappy feedback. People don't look at the thing. It's just a checkbox ticking thing, or they take very long time. So basically, you're either waiting or opening new work in order to, not be stopped by this. You know, there there are many reasons why, there are more reasons for me not to use them, or reasons why they tend to be poor in quality than the outcome that you're trying to achieve, right? And this is what I have an issue with, no, with this, because yes, in principle there's nothing wrong, right? But if every time that you're going to commit code, someone comes and tells you, gives you crappy feedback, your code is shit, like you should do this, or they tell you, you should have done XYZ, but you're clearly out of your depth, no, or you're not at the level in order to even understand what that pointer is, and then go back, and then you go into this cycle of, I went back and changed things and came back and still not good enough, and then I go back, and while that could have been
Well,
solved in a different way,
well,
and
I think this is to do with the relationship you create between the reviewer and reviewee, right? Often it turns into a political thing or some, like, I'm more senior than you are. But the context that I'm talking about is that the reviewer is actually your mentor or the person teaching you, right? And it's their responsibility that you do a good job, as well as and that you learn, right? So often when it's done wrongly, and I do agree that it's often done wrongly because a certain environment is not put in place. They say, oh, there are some these are some experienced developers and your team, you don't know what you're doing, so they're gonna review you. And normally this kind of
this already
dynamic,
sets the frame, no, like
yeah.
these people are the ones that know, these people are the ones that don't know, and they are here to keep you in check, no,
Yeah,
and
but
so
then we start bleeding into the second reason, that is the gatekeeping. So if we still stick into the teaching side, because like for me, as we discussed internally multiple times, upskilling and delivery, they are in conflict. right? So this is part of the dysfunction of using code reviews to teach someone. If you, if you are using code reviews to help to teach someone, it needs to be very explicit that that is the intention, because then what we are doing is you're saying you are creating the space for this person to learn, to try to do a thing by herself. And we are not interested in, like, we are not so worried about by when that thing is going to be done. So that's why we are
or the
assigning.
quality even, or the quality.
Exactly. So because we are, it's very clear before the code review. Before the code review, it's very clear that we are taking some specific people that are, might be new to the company or less experienced, and we're going to create a space for them within the project, trying a few real things in the code base, but in a safe environment. And then we are going to use that feedback loop as part of one of the multiple feedback loops that you might have, is part of that code review. But then it's very clear. You're not going to be pushing, hey, the code is this and that, and it needs to be done. So no, then it's clear to everyone it is a learning exercise. And it will be done when everyone is happy that is at the right level. And then it will be done when it's done, in a way.
Yeah.
That's the only way that this can work for a learning opportunity. But if you start mixing the pressure of delivery, then you start, that's where the two sides of using code reviews for teaching and as a gatekeeping, it starts mixing with each other, and that's the dysfunction.
And I can tell you another reason why I don't think it's like in life, there's many ways of doing, one thing. There's it rarely is that there's just one correct way of doing things, especially in programming. You can do things in many different ways, yeah, and certain things, although from experience and so on, you know that they would tend to get you a better result and so on. They're still kind of opinions, yeah, because it all depends on what you think a good result is, and all of these things, right? Like what you lived in the past and you think it could happen again, etc., right? And what I've seen sometimes is, no, you should do it like this. Why? Because I think it's better because of this, and this, and this, and this. I don't know, but I think it's better the other way. No, because of this, and then you go into a you me, like who's right about this. No, it's a bit like you can go easily into spaces or tabs kind of thing, and completely miss the point of what it is that you're doing. So even from the point of view of the reviewee relationship, it tends, it needs to be explicit what it is that your intent is with this. And that I've never seen anyone say, oh, by the way, we're going to do the code review, and in particular what I would like to do is XYZ. Look at this, etc., etc., right? Like that, it doesn't happen like that. Yeah.
No, but one thing I would say is that there should be team agreements, because it's not important what one person thinks or the other. What's important is that you keep a cohesiveness or coherence within your code base. I've seen, 6 developers in a code base, and 6 different ways of coding, right? And they all think they're right, and no one is in agreement. And if you don't enforce is a if you don't come to an agreement generally and enforce that agreement, then I think you're gonna get into a lot of problems, right? Now, code reviews, whether I know, like, if the agreement is complete and certain people in the team are not following that agreement, uh, one way to catch it is by code reviews. There are other ways of looking at this as well, but I think just say you will always get people who either knowingly or unknowingly will start violating those agreements in the style of coding. And arguably, there's a lot of those agreements that you can test automatically as well, right? So that they don't get in the way, and they're quick and everything else.
Yeah.
But there is I think there is an element where that you can't test. There is the kind of style of development, right, or the certain architectural patterns that you are following. And again, you can argue that they can be automated, but not all of them. And I think there is some room for other people to look at your code, whether that's through a process or not. But there is room for. I don't think it should be like a kind of like a complete no-no that we don't do code reviews. I think they have a place in maintaining certain team agreements, not
Right.
necessarily in a default process, but definitely in there is some
But
place.
now we are migrating to the actual normally the point of contention, because we discussed the using code reviews for teaching, right, for sharing knowledge and stuff.
Mhm.
But now we are already migrating to the other side. That's where probably most people
It's
suffer,
difficult,
right?
yeah, it's difficult not to go there because actually the
Exactly.
teaching part, and if it's as you said, if the delivery is not a problem, and I totally agree with that, right? You can't be teaching and then be like pushed on to deliver both a reviewer and a review. That's not going to work, right? So
Yeah.
I think that is not as controversial, but the controversial part is, as you said, it's the second part, the gatekeeping.
Yes. So now that we are entering that area, like a lot of organizations, and we've been part of those organizations, and we still deal having in quite a few projects, where, as you were saying, code review is part of the process. And so it's part of the flow how people work. They will need to work in a certain way. They commit. So it's part of their flow. At some point, they raise a pull request. Someone needs to review, and so on and so forth. And in most places, the reason for that is some sort of a gatekeeping, right?
Mhm.
To some degrees. And this is where I think that there is a lot for us to discuss in here. In for example, Mesh, you already touched upon some of those things. For example, what are the things that you should be reviewing? Right. So what should we discuss during a code review? And you mentioned a few things like low level coding styles and things like that, or very high level things like architectural patterns and solutions and so on and so forth. So I normally, in general, I find code reviews a waste of time. I will be very clear. And I'll tell you why. Some low level concerns, as you mentioned, like details of code, where you put the curly bracket, if it's the end of the line or the new line, mainly for people using statically typed languages like so C#, Java, and stuff. You put a bunch of plugins and static analysis tools. It will just check everything for you, fail the build, bang. If you don't follow that kind of way to arrange your code, if you don't follow the rules, it will fail the build. You cannot even raise a pull request. So these low-level concerns can be easily, for certain language, ironed out. And of course, when people have different preferences, they need to go to a room and agree with whatever, and they will need to concede. Like there are things that I care more, I will fight over those, and there are things that I care less, I need to give it away. But at some point, the team will need to reach an agreement, and that will be codified in all those static analysis tools, and that's about it. That's the end of it, right?
For the more style related stuff and
Exactly,
some
the low level.
architectural concerns as well, you can
Yeah.
codify and you can automate. Yes,
Exactly. So then there is a team agreement that is codified, and because then, for example, for me, this is a true waste of time. If you're gonna go to code review to be discussing where we put our curly brackets, or how big a method should be, or what is the shape that our test should have, we have a problem, because then is what I call a fundamental problem. Like, we are not even agreeing on the very low level basics, and there's no amount of code reviews that will solve that. Code reviews, you just make everyone pissed off. It will just annoy everyone and create a bad environment. So it's much better to say, let's stop this process here, and let's agree what quality metrics that we want at this low level that we can automate and agree, and not talk about that anymore. That that
there is
takes
one point to that, but there's always an exception to those as well. But let's leave that for now. Carry on.
No, I'm just conscious that I'm taking too much space here.
No.
But then there are other things as well. Then, for example, there are things that are related to the business rules, about like some specifics of the business, some risks, some I don't know, things that you need to be aware when you are changing the code, because you might cause other problems and stuff, or might not be reusing the right things and stuff. So then there is a room for that in the reviews. But my view, my guideline is, just to try to finish my point, is normally 99% of the code reviews should be resolved in a few minutes. I raise a pull request, you go there, look at it, yeah, all good, done. That's how it should be done. If we are spending a lot of time in code reviews, and every code review we need to have a conversation, we need to have a video call and spend half an hour to do that, we have a far bigger problem that code reviews are not going to solve. That's I would leave it at that.
But, sorry, go on.
No, go ahead.
I was just saying that, like, what I am arguing for is not constant code reviews. What I agree that code reviews as a process in every single commit or every single feature is a absolute waste of time. What I am actually thinking about is that there are, how you do the mechanism can vary, but there are certain things where you do want your code to be reviewed, and pairing is not enough, because pairing has a different kind of context to someone who is completely new to that context or has not been involved in developing it. They have a different kind of perspective, and sometimes it is a good tool to use, right? So it's my personal view is that the teams and pairs should be taught on when to call for a review, rather than the review to be always in place. I think that's what I'm arguing for, is that they should be calling for a review rather than it always being in their way.
Yeah, because a lot of the times it is established as a quality gate, and as a quality gate, let's say the only quality gate, let's put it like this, and as as something that is constantly happening in your process, I think they're a terrible quality gate in that sense. You know, like, and yes, we can have a conversation, etc., but it goes against a lot of things. It goes against the speed of delivery, right? It goes against, the consistency of the quality, because it will depend on who is doing the review, how much time they have for this, whether they were busy or not, or they just clicked on the thing and oh good, a few minutes. I approve all my pull requests on the 5 seconds. No, automatically it just click, gets merged, no, or whatever. But from that point of view, I think it's the bad approach to it, right? And it's also especially when that quality gate becomes a bit of a micromanagement tool, right? Like, I want to see what you've been doing, or I want to because then again, going back to the relationship, it kind of breaks that down, no. So from that perspective, I feel like even if you have the that quality gate will only tell you of the symptoms, and it's not really going to be a good way of solving the underlying cause. And there are better ways of solving that. No, again, if someone doesn't know how to design properly or how to test properly or whatever, like doing one code review yes, you learn by doing it wrong, but again, there's not a good proportion there on the feedback, the quality of the feedback, the accompaniment with this person to be able to build up the skills, etc. Right?
Yeah, so I have quite a few concrete examples actually. Of the inefficiencies of code base, pull requests or code base. Pull requests. First of all, is like, when do we do that? Because if someone has been working for a significant amount of time, let's say a day, 2 days, a week, or whatever, and then it's okay. Now that I've been working on that, I raise the pull request. And then someone says, you know what, not good enough. What do? Throw it away? Throw 1 week worth of work away? Add another 3 days to do the changes and stuff? So there is a lot of waste in that already, right? So that could have been resolved slightly different. We can get into the merit of how. So that is one thing. You can even argue, but should someone be working for so long on something? Well, there are things that will take long. You need, if you are going to build a feature end to end, might take a few days, might take a full week, might take even a full sprint, right? But doesn't mean that you're not going to be committing over time. But then who reviews those code? Because quite often this is centralized in a few people as well, and they themselves become a huge bottleneck. And quite often when you raise a pull request, means that you need that to be committed quickly so that you can continue, so your next task relies on building on top of that thing. And if that thing is not acted upon very quickly, you or someone else cannot keep going, right? So that is another source of influence. So how do you make that open the pool of people to do pull requests, or make it fast? You don't want to have a single person that their job is to review pull requests. I don't think that no one would like that job, right? So, but also if you have more people reviewing the code, you get to exactly what you're saying, Jose. Then you don't have any consistency. So why are they reviewing for? If everyone can review everyone's pull request, so what is the point of it? Is this knowledge sharing? Because knowledge sharing, you can do that in a much different way, right? And not blocking everyone to do knowledge sharing by, I raise a pull request and someone random will take that from a queue. What knowledge sharing are you talking about here?
No,
Right?
no,
So what is the
exactly.
value of it? Right? So I would rather say, you know what, guys, I committed this code, and if you want, I will set 15 minutes aside and I will take you through the design I did for the whole team. And this is how this area of the code is working. That would be far more efficient.
Inherently, if you talk about efficiency, inherently code reviews are a laggy thing. They are after the fact, and that's what I mean. Like, they should not be directly in a process. They should not be the thing that is stopping you from delivering, right? So there are a lot of things that you can do beforehand. So you should have design reviews, and you should have design kind of come up with if certain things are complex, you should propose designs and even have the whole team kind of review that as well, right? So there are certain things you can do before you actually start writing the code, and they will be much better. And having those team agreements as well, they are again a leading thing, because you have had these team agreements. That if I do things in a certain way, then we've all agreed on it, and that'll be good. So all those things should be in place before the review thing. A code review, in my opinion, is actually more related to, we review the code anyway. Like, for example, if I'm reading the code because I need to develop the next feature on top of that, but another person did it, we are reviewing that code, right? And this is after the fact. This thing has gone into development, and we are like, I'm gonna go do the next thing, and I'm looking at it, and I'm thinking maybe there's something wrong, and then I can speak to the person. So that you can also argue that review kind of happens naturally anyway. So the only kind of with this kind of tool, let's say, the code review before it goes into production, is that when you need a certain bit of confidence from somebody who actually really knows this thing well, right? So there are certain people in the team who may have a lot of experience within that code base, and know that certain things can go wrong, right? So what I would, if you're in a team, oh, this person really knows this area, I'm developing in it, I'm not as familiar with it, I'm gonna, maybe have a design review and everything else with them first, get it, nicely designed. But I would, once I'm done, or I've done the more difficult parts, I want them to come have a look and say, like, is this right? Do you think that there is a risk in this? Because it's a complex area, there might be some problems that I haven't thought about. What do you think? So it's not about style, it's not about little finicky things, it's about certain risks that the code may pose in production, that this person who has a lot more experience in that area may be able to catch that I wasn't able to catch. And I think there is definitely room for that in in the process.
It's about the solution itself, right? So I remember that because we've been in both sides of the. For example, one argument for code reviews is exactly what you're saying. There is a group of people that know a system or an area of the system very well, but they don't scale. They cannot do all the work. So you need to have other people contributing, right? And then when those other people are contributing, they need, depending on the importance of that area of the system, it should be reviewed because the other person might make a mistake. It's too important in that area. So we've been in both sides. For example, when we were working for UBS, like an investment bank, we had teams of vendors in different parts of the world that would contribute to our system. A company like Codurance, we are the opposite. We are the vendors. We work on client systems. Quite often, we go to a project. When we start a project, like we don't know those systems as well as our clients. The same way that when we were, on the other hand, the same thing. When you join, there is a new person joining the project. That person will not know that project as well as some of the other people. So there is a need for the review, but you can make these efficient. And this is what you're saying, Mesh. I remember that the way that we used to work, that I felt very efficient. Let's say that we need to build something complex, right? So, and this will take, let's say, a full sprint for me to do. Let's say that I'm doing alone, or me and Jose are doing it as a pair, but you are the guy that really understands the system inside out. You know, like what can be broken, what should be taken care of. So the way that we used to work is, before Jose and I even start typing a single character, we say, look, you know what? Let's do some analysis of this story or requirement or whatever. And let's call Mesh and say, hey, Mesh, this is our proposal. This is what we're trying to do here. And this is our high-level design. And high-level design, I mean boxes and arrows. Yeah, we're going to change this API in here. We're going to add a new service in there. We're going to throw an event in there. This is going to be consumed by that other service in there. We're going to change the database over there. This is the kind of high-level thing that we are planning to build over the next 2 weeks. What do you think about that? We haven't typed a single character yet. And then you as an expert to say, okay, Sandra and Jose, no, you need to think about security here, blah, 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 blah. So you help us to shape the high level. Again, very high level, not low level details of methods and parameters and stuff. It's just high level. But we also know that's going to take a while, so we also don't want to go for 2 weeks writing a lot of code and then raise a monster pull request and throw at someone and say, hey, here are 50 files changed across 2 different systems and stuff. Right? Because then the expert like Mesh, like it's like, guys, I don't have time to go through all of that. So then either he will just say, you know, whatever, approve, or say, you know, no, this is all crazy. No, I will reject, do that again until I understand. So this creates a problem. But what we used to do that was more efficient is like, okay, this is the whole solution. We agree on the high level design and say, look, okay, for the next step, for the next day or 2, we're going to work on this API here. But we're not going to implement the whole thing. We're just going to work on this part in here. And that's when you're going to know the low-level details. And we're going to raise a pull request just for that bit. But you are going to be our reviewer throughout. So you know what the high-level design is. And you know that you're going to be working on small chunks. So as soon as we raise the first pull request, you already know that there is a lot of things that are still not going to be done yet. And this is just the first bit. And then it's much easier for you because you already have the context. And say, yeah, cool, done, approve. 5 minutes should be enough. If there is something really serious, we just wasted 2 days that we need to change. Commit, merge. Now we need to build on top of it. Next stage. So Mesh, Jose and I are going to work on the next level now. We're going to change that table in the database or whatever. Cool, great. Pull request again. So then we make those requests much smaller, is within a context, and we are agreeing beforehand what is the direction. So the only thing to review are very tiny details that could be reviewed very quickly and easy. So and even if you need to change direction, it's not a big deal. Because like if we don't do that this way, it will become very inefficient. Right, so we cannot just take something complex and just raise a pull request and say, who wants to volunteer to review that?
Yeah.
Like this person has an absolute.
Yeah, no, it's
Right?
again, and what you're aiming for is again feedback as soon as possible. Shipping product, as soon as possible, get it out there, try it out. So I would argue that if your argument for doing pull requests is not pull requests but code reviews is that you will catch things before they go into production in that sense, you should, one, aim to automate correctness, because one thing is design, no, like, okay, it could be designed better, but does it work the way that it's supposed to work? That you can test automatically. Yeah, most of the
Not,
time.
not all. Jose, let me pick on this. Sorry, just one, because I think this is an important one. Because often this is said, and we say that, and in theory, I think it's a very good thing, but in practice, certain kind of correctnesses, especially the kind of shit that goes wrong in production, is not very easy to automate. So, for example,
You,
in one of those in one of those scenarios that Sandra was talking about, right?
Mhm.
Often this expert would say, that thing that you changing, now you add it to the query, there's no index on that, and that's a huge table in production. And and like making sure that you automate this kind of thing, this kind of knowledge, is gonna be such a huge investment that the kind
but
of
if you
changes you're making.
but if you have a system, no, okay, so I can understand that there are certain things that they're very difficult to automate, but something like what you're mentioning, yeah, you should be, you should have some sort of staging environment before you go into production. I'm not saying you remove all the quality gates and push to production. What I'm saying is, you can automate a lot of the correctness in that sense. And the example that you just gave, I know it was an example, but that I would expect that to be tested with similar volume, or something at least that kind of challenges the thing beyond what I did on my computer, right? Especially if it's a key system. The
Certainly.
second part of what I was going to say, which I didn't get to, is that the other thing that you should kind of optimize for is recovering from.
Mhm.
And this is the other aspect. Even if it gets to production, the fact that it gets to production, you want to mitigate and you want to be able to recover from that as soon as possible. So I would argue that if you had some test, even for that performance test that you were talking about, if you have, I don't know, canary releases, you would immediately find out that is there, and you will be able to roll back, and that's it. You figure it out. You mitigated the risk or the cost of that mistake, and then you can go back and try again or whatever. And
Certainly.
that will definitely better in my book than having someone that than counting on someone knowing that the index doesn't have, that the
No,
table or
totally.
the thing doesn't
So
have an index, right?
it
So.
goes Jose, it goes without saying. But what
Mm,
I'm saying is that the picture that you are painting is
mm,
not even 0.001% of the systems that are out there,
mm.
right? And every time that I want to make the next change and think, shit, I don't know what's going on, but there are no canary releases and there is not a suitable test environment. Do I then sit and say, well, bring me a canary releasing functionality and bring me all the
No,
test environments before I make
no,
this? No,
no,
you
no.
take the pragmatic view and you know that there are certain bunch of experts in there that know where the weakest points in the systems are,
Yeah.
and you get their info.
Yeah, but I think that for me the most important point in this case specific, because we are now discussing some big things, right? So the reason that we are saying that maybe code review is a good thing in this case is because we are talking about a full complex solution that will take some
Right.
time to be built with a lot of moving parts. So in order to make it more efficient, don't just wait for the full thing to be done by a pair and then 2 weeks later have someone reviewing like tons of code, and that is way too late. It's too much of a waste if that was not done properly. You can break that down in small part, agree the design up front, and have multiple checks. But this also puts a burden on the reviewer because you have someone dedicated. We used in the past also, there's another pattern. We had pull requests to actually share knowledge. I remember again back in the before Codurance, we had like a global team in quite a few countries. And we had this idea of like, look, everything we do, let's raise a pull request. And we even had a priority, say like, our pull request should be reviewed by someone from a different team. It's just for to try to share knowledge. People know what's going on everywhere. Was this efficient? It took us a long time to make it reasonably efficient. At the beginning, it was a mess. We had an internal channel similar to Slack. We used a different tool back then. And we would put things in there, pull request, and there was a batch of stuff. And then every time the rule was, and we had like almost 100 people across the world working. And Mesh, like if I'm misrepresenting, because you remember probably that very well. Basically, like after you raised your pull request, your job was to take the pull request at the top, because now you are done. You raised your pull request, so your job is to review a few of the codes and unblock the queue. But then we were very slow to do that because we wanted to understand everything and so on. So that became very slow. So then we also created a few rules. There were a deadline of a few minutes. You would push it in there, say, hey, my pull request is ready to review. If no one from outside my team would pick that pull request in the next 15 minutes or so, the team itself, my teammates, could review that. And if none of my teammates could review that, we would merge it anyway so that we could progress. But then, because the goal in there was just to share knowledge, but if that sharing knowledge is impeding us, is creating a blockage in our delivery pipeline. So now, okay, I want to share knowledge. I raised my pull request and now I need to wait for 6 hours until someone is free to review and I cannot do anything because I need that code to continue. Then it defeats the purpose. Right, so then we are not getting anything.
There is a context in here as well. Another thing was that we were bringing all these teams out at once, and we were building a system from scratch. This was crazy deadlines, and we were in a way forced to use this many teams as well. But what we wanted to do was not create almost like a levels of teams. This team is a core team, and we wanted to keep sharing knowledge, especially at the time that a lot of the things were changing everywhere by different teams, and we were all working in the same code base. In hindsight, things like microservices and so on may have helped, but at the time, the system was we were all working in the same code base, and this actually helped quite a lot. In fact, it created a certain level of equality between the teams and really helped teams understand each other's work. So in a way, that was a knowledge sharing kind of initiative, right? And of course, as you said, Sandro, initially it was quite a big problem. But introducing those rules where we would not let it get into the way of delivery actually started helping a lot, and people were coming up fairly quickly to help look at those things. And also it was putting pressures on the reviewers as well to not be nitpicking, to kind of just look at things and ask questions on how is this done, why are we doing it like this, and so on, just to help understand what's being done.
Sandra, you reminded me of another example where I think having pull requests was quite helpful, which was a system where different components were owned by different teams, but everyone could modify things. And that was also quite interesting because we had a team was assigned as a maintainer for the component, right? So things that were not related to features or whatever were kind of done by that team. But if you needed to change something, you were allowed to change something. However, it needed to go through a review from someone on the maintainers team, basically. And because basically they were going to maintain it, right? So you could not go and shit all over the place and then goodbye.
It's kind of the open source model, isn't it?
Yeah, it's similar to that, and that I think worked quite well. That I think worked quite well. Coming from a place where you had a team that would go build the features, so they would like modify whatever needed to be modified, and then leave the mess for other people to deal with, right?
Yeah.
So
that
kind of
nice.
helped, put some boundaries.
And it's funny because we had even a name for that. We had that in the past as well. Like we had some core systems in the bank and at some point we introduced what we call the component guardians. I don't even know if it was you, Mesh, that actually introduced the concept, or it was
No, it was before me.
it was
They
before
already
you.
had them. We just
No.
when we joined, there was only one, and we basically decided to have more component guardians per component, which effectively were the maintainers, because they were the ones that were actually got called on a Sunday if the system wasn't working.
Yeah, and this was a good idea. So in having someone that really understands the system and stuff, they allow people to work, but they are there to maintain the overall quality, and not only to maintain the overall quality. This is another thing that needs to be said in here, is to give the support, because like we cannot just have one specialist in a specific area of the system or of a service, and that person cannot do all the work. But if the person say like, you know what, I'm becoming like I know this area very well, and I'm not. It's not that I'm the gatekeeper. No, I'm the person that will enable other people to make changes in here, and I'm gonna help them. I will work with them to explain what needs to be done and what they need to worry about, so that they can do their jobs and we can scale that change. Right. So this is an important thing, and there is an aspect that I want to bring up, that I think that this is really important that we mention in this episode. Regardless of people's preferences of how they do pull requests, there is how can I explain that? There is like a humane aspect to it. Like, for example, what I'm trying to say is, if I worked on something, yeah, for a period of time, most people are trying to do a good job. Most people say, look, this is my task, I picked that up, I'm trying to do a good job. There is an effect. So if I raise a pull request, and if someone rejects that, or start pointing fingers in everything I've done and say, hey, go back and do that again. Well, if it happens once, yeah, it's okay. Well, all right, I can see that. Fine. Next feature happens again. I raise a pull request, bang. Someone goes there and, yeah, no, this is not good. You need to do this, this, and that. Okay. There is an emotional effect in there, because all of a sudden, so like, what the hell is going on here? Because if I'm in the system, I swear, after my second pull request if I raise pull request 2 in a row, the second one was rejected, I put a stop on that shit. So like, look, I don't want my pull request rejected anymore. So we are gonna sit down, we're gonna go to a room, and I'm gonna agree what you want.
And I'm gonna teach you how to accept my pull request.
Seriously,
pull requests.
seriously, because like, for example, like if everything that I do is being rejected, there's no pull request that's going to solve. It's just going to create a very bad atmosphere, because I will be pissed off. The person, and by the way, for the reviewer, it's also not nice to reject someone's pull request. It's also not nice to say, hey, this needs to be improved. This is also a difficult place to be. You know,
For some, it's a power trip. Sandra, for some, it's a power trip.
No, for
most, they're good human beings.
They like,
exactly.
No, I get that, but for example, as a developer, if I have someone rejected, I'll put a stop on it straight away. Say, look, you know what? I'm not gonna write a single line of code before we sit down, and you go to a room or a whiteboard and stuff, and we are gonna resolve this shit. Like, what do you need? What is the quality gates in here? What is the process that we can have so my pull requests are never rejected again? What do I need to do? What we need to agree, and when? Because what I don't want to do is to work for a full week, and someone said, "Oh, that's not good enough. Change that." And if imagine that happening to every single person. No, that's not about me. You might have tens of developers, and this is happening to a lot of them. Those people are going to resign. They're not going to stay there. So, see what I'm saying? And this is what I'm saying, that the code review process has a moral impact in the team.
It has an emotional impact.
Emotional impact. Thanks. That's the word that I was looking for.
Exactly. Yeah.
So this is important.
I think
right?
it's a very good. It's a very, very good point. You know, it can really work on a team to the point where, you know, people don't want to be there. It can disrupt the team. It can create a power imbalances within the teams, and outside as well. Especially when code reviewers sit outside the team, that could be very, very dysfunctional.
So how do you make them enjoyable then? Because That's no, there is the aspect of you're still getting feedback on your work, and it's difficult to separate your work from you, right? This is one of the things that I feel is kind of difficult with
Yeah.
that. No, I'm criticizing the code that can be taken as you're criticizing me, right? And my
Yeah.
expertise and my no. So how do you go about making those things to be more enjoyable or more um it's a better for team unity, so to speak, no, cohesion.
Let's say, yeah, forget about code reviews. Like, what would be an ideal scenario? Wouldn't it be nice, let's say, just a hypothetical, utopian kind of thinking, right? So, wouldn't it be nice if everyone could just commit whatever they wanted, and all the commits from every developers would be at a standard that everyone else agrees as well? That would be great,
And
right?
also, and they would pose no risk to production systems.
Exactly, right? So everyone knows what they're doing. They can freely commit all the time. That for me would be fantastic. It would create a very nice environment that's like, you know what, whatever I do it, I commit. Whatever Jose and Mesh do, you commit. And I like what you do, you like what I do. That would be a very healthy environment. It's a bit utopian because we have different levels of experience. You might have stayed in the project, like I might have been in the project for 2 years. You might have just joined. But we should at least try to get there, because the code reviews are a means to an end. They're not. This is something that should not be needed. So if we start working towards removing or at least reducing them to the bare minimum, or working towards where most of them are always approved, that for me is a great goal to have, because this will force us to discuss as adults what is the code standard that we need. Sometimes it's not even about code and standards, as Mesh said, it's about knowledge of the system. So is there a way that, Mesh, I can get the knowledge that you have? So at least like the bare minimum of knowledge that I need, so that I can do some tasks in a safe way without wasting too much time. So then we can have these kind of conversations, and this for me creates a healthy environment.
But this goes back to my point that Matt mentioned. That's kind of like the 0.00% of the systems out there and so on, right? But this is, I think, what you should strive for. Even if that's the case, like you have people like Buffer, GitHub, and so on, right? Where you join, and you know you need to do your first commit or your first push to production. I don't remember what it was, but on the same day or the same week, you're already pushing code out. And what they do is, like, we've established a system where we kind of make it impossible for you to put something out there that is crap, right? Like, they can really like take the system down or whatever,
So they
right?
reduce
And
the cost of failure basically to
exactly, and
very
this is what I was referring to before, right? Like, you can do that, and as the more investment you put in that system, yeah, to make sure that the better it will be, the easier it will be, but the more confident people will be to be able to jump in, contribute, or whatever. Why? Because if everything went well and I did a great job, that's perfect, it stays there. If things didn't go well, we can quickly recover from that, and it's not,
It's not going
nobody's
to cause any
losing,
problems. Yeah.
exactly, nobody's losing their head. No, and the way that they look at it is not, it's not, oh, you pushed something wrong to production and the system went down. The way that they look at it is like, we need to change something in the way that we're doing things, because the system allowed for this to happen, right? So we need to go back and review what it is that could have been done at the system level. And a lot of this is, around automation and so on and so forth. And some of these things are not, I think they're quite, standard today.
But
No,
sometimes,
that's
yeah, but sometimes, depending on the maturity of the organization, get to that point in order to solve the problem might take way too long. There are things that are much simpler to do, but you need to put some effort. So, for example, you are onboarding a new team member or a new team. You need to know that those people don't know their system. So, in order to do that, pair programming at that point can be a great tool. So say, you know what, like there are a bunch of new people joining the system. Let's take the next 2 sprints or so, and we're going to work pairing with those people, or we're going to run a few design sessions, or as they are picking up their next task, their story or task or whatever, before they start coding, let's have a design session. Let's put some boxes and arrows. So see what I'm saying? Because these you start bringing the collaboration closer between the people with the knowledge and the people that just arrived that has less knowledge. You start establishing that human relationship. You speed up their learning curve, right? And you reduce the amount of waste in the system. So you reduce that thing that people will do. They'll try to do their job, and then someone says that the job is not good enough, and they need to redo, and that is waste.
And also give them, especially these. A lot of it is tacit as well, but there are some parts of the knowledge is explicit. So these experts, they know where the weaknesses in the system are, right? So actually keeping a catalog and almost training all the new people in these areas where you know that you like if you go and change this table is very big, and if you go change connect to these systems, they're very finicky, and we need to so kind of creating this situational awareness on how where the system is operating and helping those, because that's what the experts have. Now, you can't always teach all that. And then, as Sandro said, pairing, doing design reviews, and even using code reviews as a means for teaching, uh, or even like, as Jose, you mentioned, the cost of failure, reducing the cost of failure, right? Arguably, if code reviews are done well in those cases where they're not getting in the way, all the caveats that we mentioned, they can be a mechanism for reducing the cost of failure as long as they're not getting in the way, as long as they're not helping, they're creating a bad environment in the team, as long as they're not creating massive power imbalances and all those kind of things, as long as they're not doing those. It's a tool, right? And used in the wrong way, in the wrong place, it can be destructive and unhelpful. But using in the right place, it will do the job for you, right? And
Yeah,
that's how I see code reviews.
yeah, and I would go further, saying, for example, because I mentioned the frustration of the person having the code reviewed, right? So someone reviewing my code and how frustrated I will be if my code keeps being, well, people keep poking holes in what I do. I will be frustrated. So I would take the initiative to say, look, before I do it again, let's sit down and discuss see how we can minimize that. But there is the other side, as you were speaking, Mash, that I realized. As a reviewer, it should always also be your job, because it is a bad job, like to review someone else's code and going, like, you have your own things to do, and also you need to stop and go through someone else's code, try to understand, pick holes, and say, oh my god, there is a problem here, you need to do that again. And then and when you do that, you know that you're going to need to review it again once it's fixed.
Yeah.
So from the reviewer perspective, you should be thinking, how can I enable this person so that when a pull request is raised, I spent like 10 seconds on it. I just pressed the approve button.
Yeah, a reviewer should actually be seeing a rejection as their own failure as well
Exactly.
as a failure.
Exactly the point I was trying to make.
With how to make them enjoyable and so on, I the best reviews that I can remember were not just feedback. They were actually, let's sit down and do it together, let me show you how I think it should be done, let's discuss it, and get there, no, at least point you in the direction, not just say, oh, it's not good enough because some,
Yeah,
no, it's like,
coming
listen.
coming in after the fact, basically. Yeah,
Exactly, more along the lines of, and so providing the feedback with examples of what you mean or whatever, and if you can pair to show it, that's even better, because then you can actually see what the person is saying, no. So that's one example. And I would say the other thing that would make them kind of enjoyable is if you teach people not so much to give feedback, but to ask for feedback. And if you create that culture of asking for feedback around the code, etc., etc., by the point that you get to to the review, most likely you've been asking for feedback about the thing before it gets to the review, and it just passes, right? So I think those two are kind of important, because you can teach people how to give feedback, but if you're not ready to listen to it, it's not going to go anywhere. Like it's all it there's a big part of that is the receiver, right? Like how the person takes the feedback. Doesn't matter what words you use, you can always twist it, no? So I think those two would actually help in the case where you don't want it to hurt the unity of the team, or the environment that you're in. So spending some time in teaching or engaging people on how to do that properly, in a more effective way, I think would get you a long way as well.
Yeah. Cool. So, guys, like, any final words?
By the way, I have another topic that.
Yeah, exactly.
Have you thought about?
I think my final, before you even start, my final words I think there's two elements to it. One is that it's a tool. You can't just say it's an evil thing in itself. Yes, it's a cause of many a dysfunction, but that does not mean that the tool itself is invalid. It's just that the way it's being used, and it should definitely not get into the way of people. The other thing I think we just recently, towards the end of the talk that we talked about, is the unity, cohesion, enjoyment of the team is extremely important. If you don't have that, they will not produce good results, right? So if what you have, if code reviews are actually creating bad emotions, bad atmosphere, power imbalances, all those things within the team and making people unhappy, you are definitely doing it wrong.
Especially if you're saying that you're agile.
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
people over processes and tools, no?
Exactly.
So maybe it's time to change the tools and the processes.
Exactly.
Jose, anything from your side?
No, not really. That's. I think we covered a lot of ground.
Cool. All right. So yeah, for me, like I think the only thing that I would like to emphasize is that I'm I think that again I agree that it has its place, but I still think that is waste. It is a thing that in the ideal scenario we would not need that, right? So when we introduce that, we need to have a very specific reason to add another layer in the process, another thing that will impede us to have a continuous flow of delivery. So if we are creating another layer in that workflow, we need to have a very good reason and always work to minimize that step, right? So not do I don't think we should do code review for every single pull request, for every single line of code changed. I think we should be very focused on areas or certain solutions that are more important than others, and make sure that we work hard, that most of the pull requests, or like most of the reviews, when they are done, is almost an automatic approval. Because if we are finding a lot of problems during the review, we need to step back and say, look, how can we resolve those problems so that the review can just be press the button and merge. That's what I think that should be the goals, the end goal for this. Cool. All right. Excellent. Thank you guys. Like as always, like if you stayed with us until now, after an hour, remember to subscribe to the channel, give us the thumbs up, and also like if there is any topic that you'd like us to discuss, leave your comments. And also like even if you have an idea for this episode, if you want to ask us questions about this topic in specific, we will get back to you on the comments as well. So hope you enjoyed. See you next time.
Bye bye.